Work session is in session. I'm going to ask Mr. Evans if you do the invocation for us, please.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight and ask that you watch over this board and the leadership of this district as we make decisions to better the lives of our students. Pray for safety, pray for understanding, and pray that this process is to your pleasure. For it's in your name I ask it. Amen.
Amen.
All right, sir. We're going to start with athletic updates. Mr. Rogers.
Got one update already from today. We're currently got the state meet down in Gulf Shores. We got another state champion. Bobby Gray out of Sparkman won the state championship in shot put. He wanted an indoor, and we held off on recognizing him until now because we thought he might win it, and he did. So May 18th, we'll have another resolution to get in place. But so there's an update in and of itself. But today, kind of want to go through board policy, extracurricular activities. When I came in, I noticed that the board policy, other than the one change that was made, I believe, in 2021, had not been updated since 2011. Okay, so there's been some time that since it's actually been updated, looked through, I believe. The board policy, we've got a link right here to it, but it's the link that everybody has to our board policy. Again, it's 6.19 extracurricular activities. Again, that includes athletics. Again, it hadn't been updated, looked over since 2011, other than I believe the change that was made in 2021 for middle school athletics. So I'd like to make some proposals for some changes that can be made. This first one, currently, one of the policies is that there will be no games permitted during the school day except for those tournament games scheduled by the Alabama High School Athletic Association. Again, I've been in athletics in Madison County for pushing 12 years now. This policy has not been followed in any of the time that I've been here. And it's one of those things where if we've got a policy in place and it's not being followed, you know, a rule's not a rule if it's not enforced, right? And so I would like to propose to change this policy to reflect more of what we're actually doing in Madison County as far as athletics during the school day, okay? Now, I might go back and forth between these two charts. I know that chart might be kind of difficult to see. What I had to do whenever I came in was go through these sports books in athletics and actually look at what the AHSA policy was for missed instructional time. And what you get into is certain sports allow for the loss of instructional time, other sports do not. For example, you look up here at baseball, and there's no restrictions listed for baseball. So Sparkman High School 7A program can run 32 games in a season. They can play in 32 regular season games. 6A, 4A schools can only play 28. By the way it's written in the sports book, they could miss 32 days of school, okay, because there's no restriction. But then you go down to softball or golf where you go down to softball where there's no loss of school time permitted in the regular season. Right now, they're missing some school, but that's for postseason play. That's for the area tournament. That's for regionals. That's for state. So again, there's a lot of kind of contradictions there. Where baseball, there's no limitations on how much instructional time can be missed. In softball, you can't miss any outside of postseason play, okay? And so what we'd get sometimes is a baseball team would say, we want to go and participate in the Perfect Game Tournament down in Auburn, which is a national tournament. Scouts from all over the country come there. Teams from all over the country come there. They compete, and we're going to miss Friday. We're going to leave Thursday night. We're going to be down there. We're going to play Friday and Saturday. And, again, they've been able to do that. It's been approved. They've been able to do it, which, again, does not reflect our current policy. So, again, I want the policy to match what's actually happening. Again, I believe at one point there was a gentleman's agreement within Madison County with golf. Golf, they can have 2 tournaments per week. They can participate in 2 tournaments per week with loss of school time. All right, they can have 14. That means that they could miss 14 days of school technically. And I believe at one point in Madison County, there were coaches that were saying, hey, we're going to take 10 days. We're going to be in 10 tournaments. We're going to Vestavia. We're going down to Auburn. We're playing in all these tournaments all over the state. And eventually, I think there's kind of a gentleman's agreement put in place that, hey, you won't be in any more than 5, okay? We're going to limit it to 5. And I think that was under Mr. Massey. He kind of said, hey, we can't miss that much school. We're going to limit it, okay? And that's kind of been the understanding for a long time. But again, it didn't match policy, which is no loss of instructional time. So my proposed amendment to the policy would be outside of tournament games scheduled by the Alabama High School Athletic Association, games or tournaments played during instructional time must adhere to the guidelines outlined by the activities HSA Sportsbook. So again, softball comes to us in the regular season and says, hey, we do not want to, or we want to go and play in a tournament during the school day. We can turn to the HSA Sportsbook and say, no, you can't do that. It violates HSA policy. So we can say, no, you can't do that. For tennis, again, they're not allowed to play any games during the day, during the school day. We could say, nope, you can't do it based on HSA policy. So as allowed under HSA policy, a program may miss no more than 3 days of instruction. Any additional days require district level or superintendent approval. So we would say you could miss up to 3 days if the HSA allows for it. Anything beyond that, it has to get district level approval, superintendent approval. And again, that gives us a little bit of flexibility. Cheer has already hit us up. They said the national UCA Nationals is looking at extending to 4 days. Well, currently our policy says you can miss no more than 3. This kind of gives us a little bit of wiggle room where if they do extend it to 4 and we've got a team that's going to go to nationals and compete at that level, we could say we'll allow for 4 days for the UCA competition. Okay.
Matt, this excludes travel time to local games, you know, because many sports have to leave the school slightly before.
Yep.
Car riders
And a lot of times,
are left, you know, otherwise it takes
Right.
5 minutes to leave the school.
Right.
And you wait till the buses and the car riders are involved, you're taking an hour.
and that's an issue that we run into, especially at the middle school level, I would say more. At the high school level, most of them are going to have a 4th block conditioning PE, and they can leave when that conditioning PE starts at 2 o'clock. So it's less of a issue at the high school game or at the high school level where you're traveling greater distances sometimes. You know, locally, most of our middle school teams are traveling fairly local, and you get to a 4:30 or 5 o'clock start time, and you can get almost anywhere you need to go. Yeah, I agree with you. Travel time can run into a situation with that. The HSA policies don't dictate like travel time. They just say you cannot compete during an instructional day in these sports, and it kind of outlines it.
For the middle schools and the 9th grade athletes, basically what we do is we provide a bus to the games, and the parents meet and take the children home from the game.
Right, yeah, and that happens a lot of times too. But again, feel free to look through that chart. Again, it's very contradictory sometimes. Like I said, baseball, no restrictions, softball restrictions, tennis restrictions, golf, no restrictions. So again, it can get kind of confusing. But I believe this policy right here, this proposed policy would kind of cover our bases and keep us from contradicting ourselves with the current policy and also the HSA policy. So that's.
Is it no more than 3 days plus postseason play?
Yeah, the postseason play, again, the HSA dictates that to us in a lot of circumstances. So next week with regionals, the HSAA, they're going to schedule those games.
You might want to clarify, no more than 3 days, as instructions not including postseason. You see what I'm saying?
Well, and again, we can look at the wording, but it says outside of tournament games scheduled by the Alabama High School Athletic Association. Right.
On the part where it says any additional days required district level or superintendent approval, would we ever run into a problem where a school was allowed where this school was not allowed? Would that ever be a problem? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And
Because you'd have to have.
Right.
If something messed up about permission slips or whatever, I mean, it would just be, is that gonna set us up to, we let one school do it where this school wasn't able to do it? Would that get us into some sort of trouble?
at the 3 days, which 3 days is quite a bit in most sports. For baseball, you know, that's quite a bit. So
We're putting verbiage in there that could it possibly come back on us?
I would almost want it to be a scenario where they're competing. It's not, hey, we're going to go play Ardmore at 10 o'clock in the morning. You know, they're going to a national level, you know, tournament. They're going to something that allows our student athletes to get exposure that they wouldn't normally be able to get, if that kind of makes sense. So they've got 3 already.
So you're pretty much saying don't waste your one day going up here when you could be going down towards Auburn.
Right.
I got you, but
For instance, the gentleman, you know, our wrestler that went up to Virginia, that's not part of Alabama High School Athletics, so those were additional days that he missed because he was up competing in a national
And I think that also might also fall under principal prior permission as well.
Yeah, I'm good with it. I was just making sure that it wasn't like, for instance, Buckhorn was allowed to do this, or New Hope, okay, we're not allowed to do that. You know, because it's just coming from central office or
Right.
district level.
And that's not the intent at all. We want to be, across the board.
And both schools follow the same guidelines and policies. I think both would be allowed.
And it will probably never happen. I was just saying, the verbiage is there to trip up on though, if it ever, but I'm good with it.
And the other thing, Mr. Brooks, like what you're referencing is, a lot of this is driven by the coach and how much the coach wants to take his players to, or her players to, either a platform where they can see college coaches, or like the tournament down in Auburn.
Right.
Or, so there's a lot of the coach may want to take them to more events. And that's where we have to be careful, is we want to try and limit them to the 3 days and stay within that policy as much as possible. And they need to have a good cause for why they're exceeding that. Because, again, this is 3 days outside of what Alabama High School Athletic Association says for tournaments. And so it has nothing to do with the postseason. This is just 3 days during the season, because they're already going to miss, like baseball and softball. We figured it out, Matt and I did, and there was a possibility that some of our softball girls could possibly miss 6 days of the next 10 for softball over the next 10 days.
And that, again,
all
that's
approved by
dictated from the
Alabama.
HSA, so we're kind of. But no, it would be applied evenly across the district. Now, again, if I don't know, Jarvis Wilson, the girls' basketball coach at Sparkman, says, hey, we want to go play in the Sugar Bowl Classic in New Orleans, and we need to leave on Friday before Thanksgiving break to get down there and be prepared. And then New Hope comes to me and says, hey, we'd really like to go play Ardmore at 10 o'clock in the morning. We might kind of balance that a little bit differently and look at it a little bit differently. And I would hope that you would understand that it is a different scenario, Now, they have their 3 days. If that's one of their 3 days, but beyond that, it starts being kind of hard to compare apples to apples in scenarios like that. The next one right here, again, it's just verbiage on this one. All participants prior to any tryouts, practices, or interscholastic athletic programs are required to have. Currently, we have certified birth certificate, current physical, MCSS insurance waiver form, and all forms required by the HSA. There's a little bit of redundancy there. So the certified birth certificate and current physical, I'm motion that we just remove those completely, because the forms required by the HSA, those forms are required by the HSA. So there's a little bit of redundance there. So instead of putting them both there, because what we run into sometimes, we have a tryout, and our coaches will say, okay, all you need to make sure you got your physical and make sure you got your MCSS extracurricular participation form, and that's all they have. Well, the HSA requires that they have everything in Dragonfly, which is what they require for eligibility. So again, I kind of motion that we just go to all forms as required by the HSA, upload it to Dragonfly, which is the requirement under HSA, and then the MCSS extracurricular participation form, which I gave everybody a copy of this. I was looking at possibly doing some updates to this. I'd like to see a digital copy of this document. Currently, to be eligible to participate in sports, the only document that a student athlete would have to have that would not be digital would be this document. And again, I'd like to explore ways to make this digital to where it could be signed when a student is enrolled with our schools, or something along those lines, to where instead of a head coach having to carry around, if you're a football coach, you're carrying around 120 of these in a folder. I'd like to see it become digital rather than a hard copy. Go ahead, Mr. Bird.
One of the things that I experienced with tryouts is that we have some parents who have difficulty uploading things into documents into Dragonfly. And, my minimum for tryout was a physical and parent. In order to play, you have to complete all the stuff for our HSA. We've got to have physical as a minimum for tryout.
Well,
We don't want a kid getting
Right.
And we also don't want a child whose parents or Dragonfly challenged.
Right. And, but again, what we can't have is our policy, which is a physical and parent permission, being different than what the HSA requires. Because the HSA requires that we create a tryout roster, and that in that tryout roster, they have all the required documentation. And I realize that it can be kind of difficult, especially for first-year student athletes, like seventh graders particularly. So what we've done this year is a lot of our middle schools had basically Dragonfly nights, where sixth graders could come. They had a computer lab open. Meridianville Middle did a great job with theirs. They had a computer lab open, and they could be completely Dragonfly eligible when they left that night. And so for spring tryouts and that type of thing, it's all uploaded, it's all there. They show up and they try out for their team, whatever it might be, and they've already got one created, whether they make the team or not. So I think we've got to get more to that, because like I said, our policy can't contradict what the HSA requires. So that's why, again, we've got to get more towards that. Now, has it always been happening in Madison County Schools? No, it hasn't. But, okay, we can look through it, and yeah, absolutely. But that's the requirement of the HSA policy. But like I said, with the MCSS extracurricular participation form, digitize it. I'd like to see it become a digital document, and then also the notary requirement. What you run into a lot of times is a lot of our students and their parents, they can't get a notary readily available. Again, every single document that they will sign, that they will agree to participate in sports, they can be signed digitally, okay? It doesn't require a notary or anything else. The concussion form that they sign with the HSA, the participation and agreement form they sign with the HSA, they're all digital, they're digital signatures, but we require a notary. And again, you run into a lot of problems with that. At Sparkman High School, I'd have our two bookkeepers sitting there with their, notary stuff ready, and they would notarize stuff. But outside of that, a lot of these kids and their parents just can't get to it. So I'd like to explore and see if we can remove the notary requirement from this document. And, at the very least, just remove that. Have a parent sign it, upload it to Dragonfly, because I can set it up in a way that every one of our district schools, they have all the HSA requirements, and then their last requirement is an MCSS extracurricular form. We can make that digital and upload it into the system as well. So again, just kind of looking at that and how we can make it easier for our student athletes and their parents to take care of it. But again, crossing those top two, the certified birth certificate and current physical, because they're redundant, and just move to these two bullets here. Any other? They should be, because this is just an extracurricular participation out of county overnight activity medical release waiver. So,
Question from somebody today about why the band didn't have a form.
so every extracurricular activity, that's, JRTC, band, they should almost all be doing this. And I'll say this too, this document's pretty hard to find on our website, and I think we've alleviated that. But if I was a parent and I just had to go and find this document and get it signed, and if it was, you kind of had to dig a little bit. It's better than C2C, which was and it's a lot better on us than keeping folders of each kid too, so it's a little bit. It doesn't.
And I think the majority of parents try to do it on the phone.
They do, and it's definitely a desktop-friendly platform, so. What now? You can make it work? You can. You absolutely can.
We do want to make this form a lot more accessible, and I would like to explore it. We found out that it was a challenge.
The notary may be required because this document authorizes, gives permission to the school system representative to receive medical treatment within an emergency.
And again, I'd like to just explore and see if we can do it, because, again, if the HSA can accept all of their agreements through digital signature, I just would like to explore and see if we could also do that, because, like I said, you get a lot of parents that just say, hey, I don't know who a notary is, I can't get to them, and that creates problems sometimes. So, and you're the expert there, so you'd be able to tell me if we can or cannot do that. And we signed some of the registration documents and things through a digital signature. I know Madison City has a similar document. I don't know if a notary is required on it, but I know Madison City does. I'm not sure about Huntsville City. I know. I can. I can. Any other questions on that? The next one, again, is just changing verbiage a little bit. All coaches must be approved by the Madison County Board of Education, follow HSA policy. Again, all coaches must be approved by the Madison County Board of Education and meet all requirements set forth by the Alabama High School Athletic Association. What I've noticed as I've come into this position and kind of taken over, making sure that our coaches meet all their necessary requirements, I'm finding a lot of coaches that might be 50-50. Okay, we'll have a coach that they're good under the Alabama High School Athletic Association, but they don't have board approval. Okay, or we'll have a coach that has board approval, but they don't meet the HSAA requirements. Okay, and again, we fixed that. Spring sports, we're at 100%. We were good, but when I came in the late fall and the winter, there was a lot of problems there as far as just people not being 100% in all aspects. Yes, sir.
So what's an example of not meeting the High School Association requirements? What would be an example?
Not being CPR certified. So they have to be CPR certified. They might not be CPR certified. They have to take a course called Fundamentals of Coaching, which is just some basic knowledge about coaching, what you should and shouldn't do, those types of things. And they're tests that you pay for, but if you pay for them on your first year of coaching, you're set. The only thing that has to be recertified every 2 years is CPR and AED. And again, we want all of our coaches to have that. The HSA requires it. And again, a lot of our coaches, I think there's a mindset where if they were HSAA, okay, if they were good in Dragonfly, if they had all their required documents in Dragonfly, we're good. The HSA also requires that every coach on a field is board approved. And we had coaches all over the district that they're out there, they're sitting on the end of the bench, and they're not board approved. They might be on a contract for services, but they're not board approved. They haven't gone through a personnel action, background check, et cetera. And like I said, we've been cleaning that up, and it's substantially better, and it'll be 100% for the start of 23 and 24. But there was a lot of issues with that type of thing. And I understand you've got somebody in the community that says, hey, I want to come out and help. They still need to be board approved. They still need to meet all the HSAA requirements. So.
One thing that's a requirement for HSA is you got to take a rules test.
Correct.
And so the rules test for soccer, which I was the coach of, it opened up in January the 17th and closed at the 1st of March. The board's going to have to approve coaches that don't meet HSA requirements, but you still have to take the rules test because it won't be available until later in the year.
And one thing that I've been looking at is as we have received contracts for next year, because we're already taking them, I've said get them in as quickly as you possibly can. As we receive them, I'm also going in and checking to make sure that they meet all HSA requirements before we approve a coach on our end.
So what you're saying is you may not, if this language, as long as they're board approved and they meet the requirements, doesn't say they have to meet the requirements before they're board approved.
No, I think
Yeah.
We could do the pending like we do with certification, where you can say pending,
completion of, yeah. I don't have a problem with that, but I want to make sure that the parts of that HSA requirement that you can't do.
And that's only for head coaches in certain sports. Not every sport has a rules test, and they've actually upped it for a long time. The cost of the test and the fine were the exact same. So what do you think a lot of coaches did? They just didn't take the test and they took the fine. Now they've upped it from it's a $75 test and a $300 fine. We've had a lot of rude awakenings since they've done that. So that would be one little caveat in certain sports where you have a rules test where they wouldn't be able to take that test till just prior to their.
And I would say, the way I would change this is all coaches approved by Madison County Board of Education and meet all requirements for the start of school season.
I would agree with that. The only thing is a lot of people, they'll wait till the last minute. And they'll be out there at practice waiting for a board approval, and we need to avoid that if at all possible.
I'm with you. I promise you, I didn't mind going back.
Yeah, yeah.
So, this might be semantic, when you say coaches, this means all coaches?
There's no such thing as a volunteer.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure.
Right. They have to be board approved, and I'm trying to make that as simple as possible too. If they're from outside the school system, if we don't employ them, they have to have a personnel action, they have to go through the background checks and everything else. And they have to be board approved. If they're one of our employees, there's a certified contract and there's a classified contract. And we need one of those on them if they're employed with our school system, so. We actually had discussed that a little bit. We're strongly encouraging it. We're strongly encouraging it. Strongly encouraging. I just sent that email out yesterday to all the athletic directors. Please share this information and let's get certified. There, there's a certain young coach in 2012 that came into the system that had his CDL and let it lapse because he wasn't allowed to drive a bus as a certified employee. That young coach was named Matt Rogers. So we scared a lot of coaches off and let certifications lapse, I think, from that. But there's a lot of interest. A lot of our, I was talking to Andrea Davis at Hazel Green. A lot of coaches there are interested in getting a CDL and driving their teams. And so we're hoping that it'll open up a lot of options for us.
Do they drive about morning too?
Mr. Spears is going to be the guy that,
Friday and then the other one Tuesday, Thursday?
I mean, we could make it work, especially like in the off season, that type of thing. Absolutely.
Hazel Green's basketball, they coach the basketball program by having a bus driver.
That's 100%. And I don't have a problem with it. Whenever I came here from Mississippi, every single coach in the district I was in drove a bus, and it was just understood that that would be the, and you know, I hope to get back to that. So here's one that I'm sure everybody wants to talk about. So cheer, currently our policy reads the cheerleading squads participating in a national competition will be excused a maximum of 3 full days of school. I say that we strike that completely, and they apply with the above policy. So they've got 3 days with the ability to extend it beyond that, okay, outside of HSA for nationals and that type of thing. Now, another proposal that I think might make people correct. And again, I believe the policy above that says 3 days and then beyond with board approval, that would kind of cover our bases if they do extend to 4. Something else that had been discussed, me and Mr. Kubik have bounced it around a little bit. Those that qualify to go to nationals, top 3 within the HSA state cheer competition, setting that as a minimum to be able to attend. We've had teams finish in double digits that have gotten a bid to go to the national competition. People that finish 7th and 8th in the state that then go on to the national competition. That can be kind of a hard pill to swallow sometimes. I feel like that they're going to miss 3, possibly 4 now days of instruction, and they finished barely in the top 10 in the state, and they're going to nationals.
Cheerleading squads, are they divided by Saturdays?
They are. They are.
And they do have state championships all the way down to the middle school.
They do.
Not like it's
So
not separated out like this high school.
I believe Sparkman Middle finished in the top 3 this year at the middle school level.
These are different categories.
Yes, and that's.
They do.
the championships are like co-eds, and they have small school, large school, and they have all the different.
And then all the way down to middle school, this year, like I said, I think Sparkman Middle finished 2 in the state.
So this past year, if we had this policy, how many schools would not have been able to?
3 of the 5 that attended would have gone. 3 out of 5. Yeah.
But theoretically, we could have 5 out of 5 if they got the right placements scored.
Right. So if Sparkman finishes 2, Hazel Green and Buckhorn finish 2 and 3, and New Hope and Madison County finish 1 and 2 and 4A, hey, all 5 of us are going. And then at the middle school level as well, if they finish there. But like I said, we had two teams that finished 7 and 8 this year. 7 and 8 in the state, and they went to the national tournament.
So is top three, is that too narrow? Or you think that's a fair assessment? Maybe they had a bad, ended up in fourth place. Is that, or is that too, for me, first, second, and third makes sense, but like when you're cheering, is there some flex that should be?
And there is, and that's kind of why, as I was looking at it,
Glad to be in fourth place and know you can't go.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we did the same thing for basketball. If you didn't win, you didn't win.
right.
Sure.
I mean, it sucks that it's the last game you played, you won all the other ones, but you didn't win.
Well, it's kind of, certainly in the Olympics, that, you have your qualifiers, sometimes it's beyond three, maybe it's the top six though. So I'm just wondering if the top three is.
And cheer, and that's the reason why it is not a sanctioned sport, I believe, is because it's subjective, and it's the only sport out there that is objective like that, outside of diving, but we don't have any diving teams. And because it's subjective, it can get kind of tricky sometimes, I believe, and that's why I don't think the HSA has sanctioned it as a sport, because they don't want to be a part of that, I don't think. They want the UCA to take all the heat on that kind of stuff. And a slip, a fall, anything like that could drop you from second down to fourth or fifth. And you see that happen sometimes. But
This isn't complicated. We're trying to come up with something to do, because the way the system is designed right now is a cheerleading squad can go to any UCA sanctioned event.
regional event, I think.
Regional, which could be, they could have one up in Scottsboro, and they could have 3 or 4 teams. And all you have to do is place in the top 3 to earn a bid to the nationals. So it's not like this is a large competition. So you just have to find one where you can place in 1, 2, or 3 in a regional, and you'll earn a bid to the national competition in Orlando. This, and it may be that, maybe it is the top 5. We don't have a magic number yet, but we're trying to say that if you're, because we do understand a slight bobble could go from first to third, and it could be that close. And when they go on the nationals, they can end up being the national champion, So where the magic number is, but we do feel like, and as to Angie's point, is that you should place at an appropriate level in the state of Alabama to be competitive, to go down to the national championship and miss potentially 4 days of school and spend thousands upon thousands of dollars, and, to go down there and not just be able to go to a 4-team regional and place 1, 2, or 3 and get a bid.
So I guess to answer that, do you think that has happened where schools are searching out for UCA tournaments to qualify to go to nationals?
The
Okay,
reason why you have this policy
Yes.
is because of
That's-
some of the things that were happening.
okay, okay.
And the trips were extended to days beyond the competition, so that they had some fun days at Disney. That's why you have the minimum 3-day policy that you currently have.
My question on the cheerleading, the state cheer champion competition, how many, is it every high school participates in that? Every high school participates in this?
If they field a team, a competitive cheer team, they compete. But they have to field a competitive cheer team. And the higher level schools, 6A, 7A, down to 4A, you might get some 1 and 2 and 3A schools that might not field a competitive cheer team. But everyone where we apply, they're going to field a competitive cheer team.
So let's take Spartan High School.
Okay.
We go right now. How many high schools do they compete against? Roughly speaking. Every 7A school?
There's only 32 of them, and I would say 32 were represented.
Well, they may not all have that category.
It might not be.
Right, and they might not have co-ed. So Sparkman competes at a co-ed level. And so McGill Tooland out of Mobile might not have a co-ed team, but they've got a competitive 7A
So,
team.
kind of where I'm going with this, it's not the larger high schools, is let's say you're going to Spartan, your odds of placing the top 3 are fairly reasonable. That means let's say you're a 5A school. Now you're competing against how many schools?
56.
56.
I believe, in 5A. AHSA,
Yeah, I mean,
High
I'm
schools.
not anti-top three, I just wonder if that's a,
Well, I'm kind of thinking it would be better to say,
Move the numbers
To top five or,
but,
what-
the percentages, you know, your top 25, top 15, or whatever it is, percent, because those numbers change as your competition.
So, like he asked for 7, what's 4A?
was 4A? I'd have to go look.
I see.
So beyond,
I see.
yeah, it'll be a higher number than 7A.
Placing in those,
Yeah, you the top 15%, you could be the sixth place person in a 5A area, you know.
But you got twice as many schools.
Right, yeah.
And I would rather do the top 10%, because that would give some flexibility for the others, even smaller schools.
and that's the whole point of the conversation here is what we want to do is, we have no problem sending teams to nationals in Orlando. We just want to send teams that are really competitive to compete. And talking with some of the principals, you know, they shared that we had no business going
I
to
agree
that
with
point.
the
And
idea,
so it
we
was
just
like,
flesh this out.
right, and so maybe that is appropriate to say, okay, based on the percentage of people competing, you have to place in the top 10% in the state of Alabama to earn and to be able to go to the,
I think a percentage would be better than an actual number,
Yes, sir,
Yeah.
that's what I agree.
across the board.
I agree.
and that's the whole point with the 1, 2, 3. We didn't want to say you have to be the state champion, because we don't want to limit, because it could be a little bobble or a twist, or, I mean, first and third could be a matter of, hundreds of points or whatever, however their grading scale
But
is,
if
so.
you're in the top 10%, even if you had a bad day as a team, you're sending someone who reasonably represents that sport to the national.
And then that way, because every year would change, and depending on your, your classification, whether it's co-ed, whether it's small school, large school, middle school, and how many are actually competing.
And I think 10% might be the best we could do if we were gonna go a percentage route, because Sparkman, that'd put top 3. If they've got 32 teams competing, it'd still be top 3 for Sparkman, you know what I mean?
Keeping the competition realistic in the amount of schools that participate.
Right.
So the AHS public letters,
Mm-hmm.
they don't give a whole lot of guidance each year.
No, not at all, not at all.
I guess part of the question is, I was here when we first started this whole cheer iteration. Do we even still need a policy specifically for cheer? We have other sports that are not part of.
I think when you say other sports that are part of the HSA,
Don't we have other, well, I shouldn't say sports, I guess if it's not sanctioned, then it's more like a club, it's more like archery. So do we really need to have a policy? We don't have a policy on how many kids can go to an archery tournament.
But the archery, do these other mixed sports have,
But they have a state cheer competition at the state level.
Yeah, they have a state archery and a national in Louisville that they go to every year.
But that's by invitation for, but they get invited based on their performance there, right?
Technically, so did that.
Well, theirs is they can go to, they don't have to go to a large competition. They can go to a 3-school or a 4-school competition out in a rural part, as long as it's a UCA sanction. They could go up to Tennessee and do a UCA sanction.
But from the sound of it, you can add a guy and be co-ed and be the only one in your area and do the same thing.
you absolutely could.
So really, are we trying to make a policy to address a whole bunch of little things that we're never gonna address with the policy?
No, the intent of the policy here is to just say that if you're going to go and miss 4 days of school for cheer down in Orlando, potentially 4 days, that you need to have a competitive team to go. And that's the whole piece, is having a competitive team in the state of Alabama to, instead of just letting UCA determine whether you get a bid or not, actually having to compete in the state level and being competitive. And then, if you're competitive at the state, then by all means, let's go to Orlando and let's see how we can do it nationally, or, the national champion determine. Pardon me, ma'am?
Those white jackets on were
I didn't get
Well,
one
and
the
I
whole time I
believe
was
that,
at
like,
Sparkman.
we had 5 that went, and 3 of them belonged there and were competitive,
They looked pretty
and 2 were not. And,
other than the days, is there any cost to the district? Like, do we fund any of the trip to, you say nationals? Okay.
It's all out of booster accounts. And again, the main reason I started looking at this policy is because we set a specific number of dates for one organization and no other. And I know that there were issues in the past that this was specifically aimed at addressing, but like I said, if we can almost, with the policy we looked at earlier, we can completely get rid of that policy and just hold cheer to the same standard as there. If we don't want to, set that that requirement, then we could just say, hey, y'all apply. It's the same as with every other sport that we have.
Creates a screen on that for every other sport. And, you gotta win your region.
Right.
A lot of people realize that high school coaches have 6 games that you really have to win.
Right.
That's the region.
So this just sets it for cheer, pretty much. Just kind of creates a structure internally for cheer.
But I would like to modify it and go back to 10% for category.
And see, the other difference too, Ms. Bates, is that actually there's 2 classifications that are, non-traditional sports that are actually under Alabama High School. It's really weird. If you go to Alabama High School Athletic Association, they got a spot on there for cheer. So they govern it to a point.
Cheer is
They don't really
considered,
sanction it, where I'm thinking about, like, we are very successful in our archery programs across the county, okay? And I know that we have students that compete in archery on the national level. But archery is not covered under the Alabama High School Athletic Association, where cheer is actually recognized.
it's recognized as a support organization. It's their wording. They tell them where they can stand during basketball games. That's what they do.
So when we have these schools that fundraise for nationals, over the summer, and we have this policy, and they don't make it, there lies a challenge where, folks are like, why do we do all this fundraising?
Right.
There's almost an automatic, if I fundraise, we're going to nationals. And so there's gonna have to be some conversation around that if we're gonna, because if I was a cheer parent and we spend all this money for fundraising and we're number 4, top 10%, we don't qualify, do I get my funding back for this? I mean, so those kind of conversations
I agree.
definitely have to be clear, because I would have the expectation. It doesn't fold into the cheer program. No, this was a fundraising
For nationals. Right. I can see that.
And again, the whole point of this is that these are policies that Mr. Rogers, as he's been going through the manual and all, he's identified some problems, and now was the time to, we need to bring these up and have discussions about them, and we can, and I'd appreciate any other comments that you all additionally have on this, that you send it to me in email, so Matt and I, we can take a look at them, Mr. Perkins, we can vet those out and see, but we wanted to have a starting point for what we had some problems that we need to discuss.
It's a good starting point, for sure.
All right. This is the old conversation, and it seems to just keep on coming up.
Oh, goodness.
Keep beating that old dead horse. Can you pull up? So everybody knows that, again, in 2021, I think there was a little change made, okay? And for years, the policy had always been an absolute ban on middle school players playing high school athletics. Unless a school did not offer a sport in their building, it was a ban. You had to play at the middle school level. I don't really like that policy. And I can see some issues with just the Wild West where anything goes. And so, again, my entire purpose with even reevaluating this and looking at it again, when I was at Sparkman High School and Lavelle Everett came out, who oversaw athletics at the time, came out and he spoke with me and my two counterparts at Sparkman Middle and Monrovia Middle. It was kind of an understanding that, hey, we're going to allow middle school players to play up, but there's going to be some parameters in place. And then it was just removed. There was kind of an agreement put in place, a protocol that was put in place. But again, that protocol I don't think was very well communicated. A lot of principals, a lot of coaches weren't really aware of that protocol. And that was where all four individuals were going to be in agreement. Both principals, both head coaches, they would be in agreement, and they could play up at the next level if all four were in agreement. And that can cause some problems in and of itself. If you've got one coach that's a holdout, or you've got one principal that's a holdout and just says, nope, it's not happening, that can cause some problems. That can lead to issues such as, I'll call it taking your ball and going home, right? Okay. And believe it or not, we've got a lot of parents now. Athletics is getting more and more competitive, more and more crazy, I'll say it. Parents are willing to pick up and move a kid somewhere else if they can't play. And I would hate to see us lose elite type athletes because we put restrictions that other school systems nearby might not, okay? Now, with all that being said, and talking with Madison City and Huntsville City, I've talked with both of them. Hey, what is y'all's policy on it, okay? Can you go back to my slideshow? So, there it is. So, these are the current policies for Huntsville and Madison City, okay? Huntsville will enact this in 23 and 24. And I talked with Mac Howard, their current athletic administrator, and Huntsville City's policy looks very similar to the previous Madison County policy, okay? And in talking with Mac on it, again, for a long time, there were no restrictions, and he started to see the loss of middle school athletics. And so this is something that's going to be put in place for them next year. Again, very similar to the policy that we had prior to 2021. Over here, the Madison City policy, again, kind of mirrors some of what we've seen in the past, okay? Now,
Lines that, Matt, while you had that up there, I particularly want to take a look at. The first line on Madison Cities, it says only eighth graders may be considered. And the second line says can only move up to the varsity level. Moving to the freshman or junior varsity will not be allowed. As well as if you look at Huntsville Cities, it says the athlete will participate at the varsity level. Okay, and those are some key points that are going to come out shortly, okay? So I just wanted to point those out.
and, just in looking through and looking at the pros and cons, and like I said, and this affects different schools in our system differently, okay? At the 7A level at Sparkman High School, this was almost a non-issue. Just honestly, there were very few student athletes at Monrovia or Sparkman Middle that could come in and compete at a 7A level. Just being 100% honest. We also had a whole lot more to pick from with, pushing 2,400 students, 9 through 12. It wasn't an issue at Sparkman High School. I haven't seen it really become much of an issue at Sparkman High School. At the 6A schools, it gets a little bit more, dicey. There's a little bit more, this kid's pretty good. He might be able to come up and contribute at the varsity level. And then you get down into the 4A schools, and it becomes a lot more prevalent, okay? You've got, New Hope High School, that's the smallest 4A school in the state, okay? They've got a lot of middle school players that start on varsity athletics. And in a lot of those scenarios, that program is not offered at the middle school level. So, for example, they've got a baseball team at New Hope High School. They don't offer middle school baseball, okay? They had a starting center fielder that was in 8th grade this year at New Hope High School, okay? You're going to see that a lot more at the smaller schools. You also start to see at the smaller schools where unrestricted pulling up of middle school players can kill programs at our middle schools, okay? You get to a Central or, Madison County Elementary. Miss Henshaw there is working really hard to try to bring some sports in and have sports in Gurley at Madison County Elementary. And when you've only got a handful of kids that actually come out and try out, and then you pull 3 or 4 of those students, it becomes a problem. Whereas it's not really a problem at, Meridianville Middle where you have 60 kids that want to play baseball and Coach Wright at Hazel Green High School pulls up 7. I've got, I cut 30. I can go pull 7 more from those group I would have cut, and I'm still okay, and I can still be competitive, right? Whereas, at the smaller schools, it's not a possibility. So, again, I see pros and cons of both sides, okay? You know, some of the pros, you get higher levels of competition. These middle school athletes will be competing at higher levels. They see that higher level of competition, which will prepare them better to be better athletes in the future. You get more opportunities for middle school athletes that are on the bubble to develop, and that's like the example I just gave for Mariaville Middle. 60 kids come and try out, I'm cutting 30 of them. 7 of those kids could go play at the high school level. Now I get to keep 7 kids that wouldn't have developed without that, okay? Those 7 kids that were on the bubble, you know, they're kind of right there. I might be able to pull those kids up, and they can come into my program at the middle school level, and hey, over the next 2 years, they might develop into pretty good players. So I can see where it would kind of open up more opportunities for them. You get more improved strength and conditioning opportunities at the high school level. A lot of our middle schools just don't have weight equipment, and so they're not getting that same strength and conditioning opportunity at the middle school. You know, having the same coach and being in one program for 6 years, it really helps, I think, in a lot of scenarios in developing a player, playing under that one varsity coach for 6 years. The one thing I hate about coaching middle school is once I got them about like I liked them, after 2 years when they were in 8th grade, I had to, you know, bid them farewell, and they went on to the high school somewhere else. So having a kid for a long time, being able to develop that kid, you know, that's something, there's something to be said for that. And then again, retention of elite student athletes. I put that in there because, like I said, athletics has gotten crazy. I'll say it. It's gotten absolutely crazy. And people will pick up and they will move. They will go somewhere else, you know, if they don't have opportunities in one system versus another. And I would hate to see where a very elite athlete said, well, Madison County doesn't offer me the opportunities that other places do. I'll go somewhere else. And again, I don't like that. You know, I almost would want to say good riddance to those individuals, but at the same time, it's the unfortunate truth that we see that happen sometimes.
What's our policy now? Is it 8th grade only, or is it?
Our policy is that if all 4 of those individuals I spoke of earlier, the 2 principals and the 2 head coaches agree,
It don't matter what grade?
the way it was written up in the original, and again, this wasn't a policy. This was just a protocol procedure that Lavelle Everett kind of put in place. And again, I see that.
We really don't have a policy in place.
No. And I think, like I said, I think that's the issue right there. We need to have some guiding policy.
Well, we do
A
have
Policy
protocol.
pretty much says that we follow the Alabama High School Athletic
Correct.
Association guidance on
Which Alabama High School Athletic Association is 7 through 12.
Right.
So,
Right.
And we did that because it's not for, none of us watch these kids try out to play or anything.
right.
As a board trying to decide, as non-coaches, we don't decide curriculum, we don't decide school. I mean, why are we trying to delve into this? That's why we left it at the level of the
AHSAA.
there's way too many.
High School Athletic
I'll go
Association.
along with that, but at whatever the letters she can't remember, I can't even. So the letters that we can't remember, their policy or whatever is, you can't play more than 6 years of
Correct.
sport.
Correct.
So in a sense, that kind of cuts it off at 7th grade, or you don't get to play your senior year, you come in 6th grade.
You can't come in at 6th grade. It's only open 7 through 12,
That's what I was, okay, that's what I was asking what the cutoff was.
7th grade.
So our policy is to follow the Alabama.
That's what our policy
Right.
is.
But they created a procedure. The coaches and the
agree
principals
on
and the
it.
coaches and Mr. Everett worked on a procedure. But now that the procedure's in place, they don't want to follow it. Or it's not being followed.
I wouldn't even say that as much as just, it's not,
Unclear, yeah.
Consistently followed.
yes.
And- Right, right. Yeah, we've had a policy as long as I've been on the board at least, and probably before that.
Like I said, I believe that originally the policy was, it doesn't happen unless the program's not offered, and then that was just completely removed.
Yeah, before, prior, I believe, the 1A, 4A schools had more.
Right.
flex and-
Both had a policy that spelled all that out.
Right.
And what was removed in 2021?
Yeah,
We had a
Was-
policy that you couldn't, and then we had a policy, remember Dan trying to make sure we covered every single base because of the good that athletic fund not intended? And then the policy was basically, they could play up if they met what now this guideline says. And then when we went in 2021, we decided that it was not for us to decide what the guideline
Okay.
if there's a seventh grader, and there's a seventh grade team, eighth grade team, and a high school team,
Mhm.
all coaches have to agree. So if the, just an example, the seventh grader wants to skip the eighth grade team, can the eighth grade coach be the, I'm gonna take my ball and go home guy?
Can the eighth grade coach
Yeah,
do that?
if you want, if it's a seventh
The
grader.
way that the
skip eighth
policy, the way that, I say policy, the way the procedure that was in place is written up, yeah. There can be one person that says, I don't agree to that, and, we don't, there isn't one.
We don't have that.
Because the athletic association says 7 to 12. It doesn't.
And I mean,
It just says you have to follow that.
The athletic association, 7 through 12, is written with the idea of two things. One was the availability of a wider range of sports at the high school level. So, for example, my daughter was a swimmer in middle school, doesn't have a swim team, so she's going to high school.
But for us, why they wrote it doesn't matter. We chose what governing body to go with, and that governing body has that in place as a policy.
and the policy has always been if a program was not offered at the middle school level, they could play up. You know, swim, tennis, track and field, some of those that aren't offered at the middle school level, seventh graders have always been able to play. There could be a junior varsity and a varsity team, but generally it's just a high school team.
So could it be our policy currently is correct, we just need modified, updated procedures, or we're trying to update policy?
Well, that's one of the things that I wanted us to talk about tonight, because the part here that is concerning to me is the con side for this. And that's why, Matt, do you want to cover the cons, and then we can continue?
Yeah. So some of the stuff we run into, Buckhorn and Buckhorn Middle are about the only one that transportation doesn't become a major issue, because, I mean, they're sidewalk apart. You know, that kid just has to walk across campus. Meridianville and Hazel Green don't have that. New Hope, to a certain extent, does have that. Sparkman Middle, and Monrovia do not have that. So transportation becomes a major issue, I think, for middle school student athletes. Loss of instructional time. The middle school and the high schools are in completely different schedules. Like I was saying earlier, whereas, you know, high school football, they start at 2 o'clock, and they've got conditioning PE at 2 p.m., and they can start practice at 2 p.m. Does that mean that a middle school kid that is down at Monrovia can jump on a bus or with his parent at 1:30, drive over to Sparkman High School, get dressed, and start practice at 2 with everybody else? Again, loss of instructional time, I think, becomes an issue. Again, when they start leaving for competitions, if they say, hey, we can leave at 2 or 2:30 during our fourth block time and still get there when we need to, does that mean that now we're going to take, you know, that middle school kid out of an Algebra 1 class that he's taken, and he's going to miss Algebra 1, you know, it could be 32 times in a season. He's going to miss Algebra 1 32 times to go and, you know, compete at the high school level. I would also say, like, loss of opportunity for middle school athletes who are not ready for the high school competition. Again, the main school that I keep having in mind when this happens is like with Central, okay? If 16 kids come out and try out for baseball at Central School and 4 of them are not very good, they get cut, they're down to 12 kids. The high school says, we're going to pull up 3 of them. You now have 9 kids. You can't field a team. You can't really go back and say, hey, y'all 4 that I cut, y'all come back. You know, that's not really a great position for them to be in. So now do the 9 just sit out a season and not get any development to play?
Example, would the central coaches just nix that and just say, hey, look, no, we're not okay with that? Is that, would that not be?
Under the protocol the last time that, you know, that was set up that not many people know about or follow, that protocol that was set up, they could say that. But again, if the parent wants it, us telling a custodial parent, no, you can't do that because the middle school coach said so or because the principal said so, that starts becoming kind of iffy on our part, I believe, too.
But the whole central thing you're talking about too is now you're combining 2 schools.
Correct.
Because Madison County Elementary.
And Central, they combine
Cannot field a team.
on their own.
On their own.
Correct.
Then that, I mean, that kind of brings in 3 schools to 1 place.
You mean Madison County High, Madison County Elementary, and Central?
But a significant con, you listen to things that I agree with, significant con is that by and large, when an eighth grade middle school student goes to the high school, either the junior varsity or varsity level, their playing time is diminished unless they're an exceptional athlete. They're already on the bench.
Right. And I mean, you see that happen too. You know, a kid comes up to sit the bench at the high school level, and that's not in the best interest of the student athlete. It's not. If they're not actively participating and competing, it's not in their best interest. And I would agree with that 100%.
I think what several of us, including myself, I'm trying to have protocols, policies that protect the programs at the middle school level, protect the interest of an athlete who's maybe very good at the middle school level, but you get no playing time, no development at the high school level. And at the same time, there are exceptional, truly world-class exceptional players that show up every now and then.
And I'll say this too, and Ms. Bates brought this up. You know, at some point we have to trust our coaches to make those decisions. If a coach says, if a coach is probably not going to bring a kid up to sit the bench, they're probably going to contribute to some extent. So just like we have to kind of trust our teachers to be professionals and do what they're supposed to do in the classroom, we should be able to trust our coaches to a certain extent to make a decision that this kid's going to come up and contribute at some level at the high school level.
I guess it's implied, the assumption is if they're at that level, at the high school level, coaches at the middle and high school level have determined that they can play and compete and actually be a factor on that team. We should make
Right.
that assumption.
And again, my feeling is we need some sort of protocol at least that says this is what we are going to do and this is how it's going to be done. Again, I'm open to what that policy exactly is. I agree a lot with what Ms. Bates has said about, you know, we're going to follow HSA policy. I agree with that 100%. But again, I say it sometimes, gentlemen's agreements are great as long as everybody's a gentleman. And, you know, we don't always have everybody being a gentleman about it. To me, if you're going to take a kid from a middle school team, the least you can do is inform that middle school coach that, hey, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do, okay, this is what I plan to do, and not just let him pick his team and then pull from that and leave him kind of stranded out there. Because, again, what we need is basically vertical alignment within our athletic programs. And if a middle school coach and a high school coach are on the same page and can't see eye to eye and don't get along, that's a detriment to the program as a whole. And so, again, if you come to me and say, hey, I plan on keeping these 3 kids at the varsity level or the junior varsity level, at least now as a middle school coach, I can say, okay, those 3 kids are gone. I'm going to keep 3 that maybe wouldn't have made the team had I had those other 3 that he's going to take. You know what I mean? So I feel like we need some sort of procedure that we will follow. This is what we're going to do.
But how often is this going to happen? I mean, we're talking about elite athletes.
Elite athletes?
Really going to
And that's the
high school?
Every year.
Yeah.
Every high school.
I think Hazel Green Baseball, I believe, I said seven players. I think Hazel Green Baseball, when I came in to this role, Hazel Green Baseball had already pulled 7 players from the middle school team to the high school team.
Were they playing on varsity or junior varsity?
Freshman, junior varsity, et cetera.
But the policy states varsity.
No.
No.
It doesn't. There isn't a policy.
Any team in the high school level.
Yeah.
They can be pulled up to play on.
And that's kind of where we're getting to the point where, you know, Matt and I have talked about this at length. And we've hashed out just about every way. And what I'd like to do is come up with a way to protect the middle school program so that there is a way that it's a viable program and they're not pulled up, but not to make it where there is not opportunities for kids to be pulled up, to be promoted to the high school teams. Not saying that they have to go to varsity automatically, but what we're looking at is, the way it says right now is that a high school coach is supposed to evaluate through tryouts, through practice, or through competition, and determine which athletes are capable of coming up. Then they're supposed to talk to the middle school coach about those athletes. Then they're supposed to meet with the high school principal, and then they're supposed to meet with the middle school principal. And if all 4 of those are in agreement, then they're supposed to meet with the parent And there's supposed to be consensus of all 5 in order for that athlete to come up.
Correct.
What's happening is a lot of our high school coaches are evaluating kids on these travel ball clubs. And it's taking away from our middle school. Like we said, there are some 7th graders being brought up that are not on the varsity team. They're not playing on varsity. They're being brought up to play freshmen. One of the things we wanted to look at was, what if we had something in place that said, when you enter middle school sports and you make the team, your 7th grade year is your evaluation year. So you stay playing 7th grade middle school ball, because we're actually looking at changing the middle school athletics. Instead of having 7th grade teams and 8th grade teams, having, for lack of a better term, A or B, which should be competitive in development, or varsity and junior varsity at the middle school level. So the 7th grade year, the high school coach could evaluate during that entire season. The middle school season is over. At that point, they still have the opportunity to bring them up and put them on the JV to finish out the year.
It's usually a month separation between the end of the two.
Right, depends on the sport. It could be anywhere from 3 weeks to a month, and it could be as many as 20 games. But the other thing is if they evaluate during the 7th grade year, then they know, I've identified these 3 7th graders that are those athletes that are going to be coming up. So you can plan for the 8th grade year that they're going to be coming up to the high school, which would give the middle school an opportunity to maybe schedule those 8th graders in last block or last period PE, where they could maybe get up to the school, miss less instructional time, compete. But they've been identified through a full year, and so it leaves the middle school team intact for a year and gives them a chance to mature. It gives them a chance to grow and develop a little bit. And, as some of our premier, one of our premier athletes, which was a state player of the year, his 7th grade season, he played at the middle school team. He wasn't brought up until his 8th grade season. So this is more in line to what we've actually been doing. And it just gives the middle schools a year, and it gives the coach a full year to evaluate that talent to determine who really is the best to come up and be pulled up.
And we've had a lot of great athletes.
The junior varsity or the varsity, it doesn't have to be the varsity level. It can be, so they can still come up and work out with the team. And so that's kind of what we've kind of tried to come up with, something that is equitable to all sides. And also, if we were looking at something like that, it would not involve the middle school coach having to give authority to do it. If the high school coach identifies that athlete, to definitely have a conversation with the middle school coach and let them know which athletes they're looking at for the following year. And then it would be consensus with the parent, because the parent's on the hook for actually getting the child up to practice and all that. We don't run buses for this type of activity. So that's kind of where we're kind of coming from, to give some credibility to the middle school and give them a full year to evaluate them and plan for that child to be able to brought up. And that way the parent can also plan too. So that's what we're kind of talking through. Matt?
Like I said, there's been a lot of great athletes in the last 10 years in Madison County. You can talk about Kyra Lewis at Hazel Green. You can talk about Kyle Wright, who's won a College World Series and a World Series now with the Atlanta Braves. You can talk about Carter Blossingame from Buckhorn, who played at Vanderbilt, was the lead blocker for Derrick Henry for years at Tennessee, is now at the Chicago Bears. You got Caleb Holt, right? One thing in common, they all played middle school sports. And so show me some of those kids, that are out there right now. And we probably got a few walking around, but they're few and far between. So, again, if they cannot compete at a varsity level as a middle schooler, I have some pause on, them coming up.
So, and I won't belabor the point, but if coaches are pulling kids up at the 7th grade level to play on the freshman or JV team, either A, there's enough depth at the middle school to cover it, and they're like, hey, look, I want to go ahead and develop these kids at the high school, or maybe there's a lack of communication between the coaches, or there's some friction. Like, what is driving some of the trying to create some guardrails with it? I mean, is it just willy-nilly? We got some conflict between middle school and high
One big problem I'll say is it needs to be across the board. It's the same everywhere. So if I'm at a high school and there is friction between me and the middle school, and that coach is throwing a wrench in the plans and saying it ain't happening, like I'm not letting anybody go, or a principal says I refuse to let any of my middle schoolers go up and play. And like, but then at another school, hey, there's great relationships. That high school coach comes and talks to the middle school coach and says, this is what my plan is to do, and it happens. So what we're getting is, you know, at one school, it flies and it's good. At another school, it doesn't, and there's friction there, and, you know, a parent saying, hey, I've got a coach or I've got a principal that's telling me that my kid can't play up at the high school, but if they went to another school in the district, they could play up at the high school. So I mean, there's some issues like that to deal with. You know what I mean? Not just, hey, I could go to Madison City or Huntsville City and do it. I could go to another school within our district and do it, but I can't do it at my current school. And that's coming from like a parent.
Well, and that goes back to a conversation we had way back in 2019 where, you know, our coaches, adults need to be adults too.
I agree, 100%. And
Having those real, you know, set guidance and say, look, this is what we expect of you. And this is a 7 through 12 program. We expect the middle school to work with the high school and vice versa.
Right.
And we're not going to deplete the middle school programs to elevate the high school. These are things that some non-negotiables in there. We're going to have a competitive team at the middle school. I mean, you would think that all of our schools would have that spirit. And if not, the district's responsibility is to say, look, you will have that spirit.
right.
That's what we're doing.
And like I said, I feel that if we have a protocol in place that, hey, this is what we are going to do, and across the district, again, we're not a district of schools, we're a school district, we're all gonna be on the same page and do the same things. I think we just need a protocol that we all agree on, this is what we're gonna do. And again, if it's very open and lenient, that, hey, if they're a seventh grader and they're gonna bring them up, if the custodial parent agrees to it, that's what we're gonna do. Or if it's, hey, they're gonna stay down as a seventh grader, come up and play as an eighth grader, that's perfect. If that's what we choose to do, that's fine too, but there needs to be some guidelines, I think, and some guidance. And like I said, I was disappointed when it was just completely removed and there were no guidelines put in place. I'd like to see some sort of guidelines that we as a group, as a protocol can have a protocol and agree on.
So a couple things.
Okay?
A couple of things that somebody probably can understand, but if we have to develop a protocol, again, I think that protocol should come from the people who do this for a living. And then we can say whether or not as a board we like it, but I don't know that we vote on protocols, but that's neither here nor there. One of the problems that I have, I shouldn't say problem, one of the things that I see as problematic with the current guideline that we have in place is nobody knew about it. That's on whoever was supposed to communicate that. That is not on the board. It's not our fault that nobody told anybody we had a protocol. If the principals are who put these coaches in place and trust them to coach these kids, then they should trust them to decide where they need to be in the 7 through 12 spectrum. The only thing that a principal should come into play in is if there is an academic or behavioral issue that the coach may not be aware of. And after that, the two coaches should be able to get along. And if you are calling the high school coach kind of your head coach, then that should be who says, unless there is a very either egregious problem that the principal brings up or whether the middle school absolutely has not enough people to play. And if I'm not mistaken, Central handles that by having a tryout where they keep a bunch of people and then they have another cut in August after they know what's going to happen. So there are ways to do this and have been ways to do this that are working quite well until somebody decides to pout and take the ball and go home. And that's not the board's problem. That's the coach's problem, and the principal should handle that.
That's a violation of HSA policy too. You can only have one evaluation period per year.
I don't go to that center. Oh, well, I give you a list. But my point is,
And I agree with you 100%,
it's like asking us to figure out the code of conduct.
right?
We don't do that. And I'm not trying to shirk my responsibility, but what is the question you're asking us? Because this is not our expertise. So what is it that you want us to come up with as a board?
Well, we removed a policy that was in place and didn't replace it. So it's just the Wild West right now, and I feel like we need some constraint. If the policy had been,
We replaced it with the structures. This I had the Alabama High School Athletics Association.
Okay.
Governs 7 through 12. And we assume as a board that there was protocols in place that were
Right.
followed to handle that structure. That's,
Yeah,
But those protocols,
and what it sounds like to me is that some of our schools were not properly following process and protocol. They were just doing whatever they want to do, and there's some conflict there at the middle school and high school. Is that fair?
Correct.
And there's also some parents will push their kids to go play high school immediately when they hit middle school. And
And again, if they have the permission of a custodial parent,
It's the same as like you were saying, they may not get playing time, but they get practice time. So if the parent is under the auspices that they're gonna get playing time and they don't, then the parent should have asked that question or known that that was a possibility when they said yes. I mean, as a parent of athletes, I know my kid may not get playing time. It's not a guarantee. And if he doesn't, then one of two things happen. Either I did not make sure he was disciplined enough to do well at practice so that he could get playing time, or my kid didn't obey what I told him to do, and I don't know that parents push their kids too hard. I'm sure there are parents that do, but again, that's not the board's responsibility to relegate that either. That's the parents' responsibility to make those decisions for their children.
And you make a good point, Ms. Bates, and I think the best thing to wrap this up with is this way, is that there is problems with the current protocol, and we need to figure out the proper way, and we will handle that at the district level with our coaches and our athletic director, and we will get it taken care of. I just want to make the board aware that there are problems with the protocol, and we're going to be working on that. So if parents do contact you about it, we've got to get something in place where they understand what the rules are, and we're all on the same page as far as the rules, so.
Oh, I agree with that.
But
It
'cause-
sounds like part of the problem is there's a lot of people who didn't know there were rules.
So, what we'll do is, Matt, we'll get with the representative of the coaches and principals, and we'll work through it, and we'll come up with a procedure at our level.
And I do want to say, I think you've done a great job. I don't mean to be.
oh, you're fine. And I agree 100%. I will just say, I came in October, and like I said, I've been doing a lot of cleanup, and so I will say that. And these are problems that I'm noticing, that I'm coming across right now, that I'm saying, hey, this is an issue. We're going to see this issue continue to rear its head unless we do something about it. That's kind of where I'm at.
So
It's okay.
and the high schools are currently unaware. Have they had any input? Have you talked to any ADs at the high school level yet, or about this possible protocol?
I have. I've talked with coaches. I've talked with athletic directors. I've talked with principals. There's some that are very, there's some that say it shouldn't be happening, period. We shouldn't have any middle school players coming up and playing. And then all the way to the other side where, hey, if there's not a policy in place, we're going to follow HSA, and I'm good with, I mean, it's a spectrum of, kind of what we've seen. And again, a middle school coach, and I've had this conversation with a lot of middle school coaches, I'm sorry, in 5 years, nobody's going to remember who won the middle school championship. Nobody's going to remember. Somebody's going to remember a run like Buckhorn made this year with a kid that was brought up in middle school to win a state championship. So again, the whole purpose of a middle school program is to feed a high school program and to prepare middle school athletes to compete at the high school level. It's not to win championships. So for me to say as a middle school coach, well, I don't want to lose my best kids, I want to win a championship this year, that's not really a good excuse for holding on to a kid that needs to be playing at the next level. And so, we got middle school coaches that say, oh, I don't want to win that, or I want to lose that kid that can win me a championship this year. Of course you're going to have that. Again, is it a valid argument? No, it's not. But you've got middle school coaches that say that and high school coaches that say we want them all. Just bring them to me. So, I mean, it's.
I don't disagree at all that there are a lot of cons to letting kids play out. I don't know that I think it is in the best interest of kids.
Yeah, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, there's a big difference in maturity and
Not all of them.
yeah.
But the bottom line is our governing body did not support us in any way, shape, or form in making a policy that says it can't be done. And until
Right.
that change, it's very similar to these policies they have that make it 100 different ways that you can have off. Baseball can go willy-nilly, but girls softball needs to make sure they're in there because apparently we're supposed to take care of folks. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the fact that our governing body does not give us the
Right. And, I mean, they're governing a pretty broad swath of the, you know, where we are as well. They got a 1A school and a 7A school,
And that's where we
you
have
know.
to trust the people that we put in places of authority within the system to maintain those protocols and to know what's best to manage things.
And again, I agree I agree. I don't want to see the loss of middle school athletics and everything else, but I do agree. Y'all tired of beating this dead horse?
Yeah, Mr. Rogers, thank you. I appreciate your thoroughness, and, I think we all want to do the right thing for our student athletes. So,
And that's the thing, we all just need to do what's in the best interest of a kid, and most of the time you can agree on that. These are in there, we don't have to go through these obviously today, but I'd like
Just so
it.
you know, Matt's also working on creating Madison County Schools Athletic Handbook and Madison County Schools Coaching Handbook, so that way we do have, that, he's working on and actually having handbooks in place for both those things, so.
The athletics handbook is only 13 pages, do y'all want to go through it real fast? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Any other questions? I linked it. I'm a digital guy.
Digital copy is much better because I would have done that before with my book.
I understand. Any other questions?
Matt, thank you very much.
thank you.
Carrie, I'm sorry that you're getting to follow Matt because.
Like, I'm a Buckhorn graduate and I'm getting the worst.
Mine'll take less than a minute, so y'all are lucky. So, you can ask as many questions as you want, and I will be as brief as I can, because I know everybody's ready to go. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about a federal programs registrar proposal for a position. As you guys probably already know, we are pretty self-sufficient down in federal programs world as far as we fund ourselves from the money that comes in. So nothing that we do ends up costing the district money. Sometimes I have to get creative with how we do things in the budget to make it happen. But this is cost neutral for the district. Just that up front I know is always important. But when the program shifted around, as you know, my position changed, and I took on some of the responsibilities that had previously been the assistant superintendent of instruction responsibilities related to some federal programs. And then we took homeless from student services. And so our scope of programs has expanded over just the last few months. But what we have realized with that scope is that the clerical support that is required for that is tremendous, because Title II has a tremendous load, homeless has a tremendous load, but EL population in our district is the fastest growing demographic in the district. If we just went demographic by demographic, we've had a 400% increase in the last 5 years in the number of students who speak a language other than English and require services for that. And because of that, we're managing student files much like special education files are managed. We have centralized filing for that. We have centralized records requests. We have centralized distribution of those records back out to other districts. And so what I'm proposing is this federal programs registrar position that would pick up and support the oversight of our special populations records that are not special ed. Because if we, by law, we're required to keep that documentation and make sure that it's available to other districts. But when we've added all these additional programs, our clerical people, their positions haven't changed. And then they've gotten all this extra work. And we know that, and I don't think that I'm speaking out of turn when I say this, but we know that our clerical workers in the district are not highly paid, but we continue to add those additional responsibilities and duties onto those positions. And I feel like, in all fairness to the staff that I have existing, the right thing to do is not to give them more additional responsibilities for doing the job that they were already previously paid for, but rather to shift some of those responsibilities around to make it equitable. So that's why I'm really proposing this position, is so that responsibilities within my department clerically can be shifted so that we have adequate support for the populations that we're supporting. Because within our program, we're supporting now Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, Indian education, homeless, neglected and delinquent, foster care, and I know I'm for an EL, and so it's just expanded and expanded. Originally, federal programs really was a lot of oversight for Title I, and so as we've grown the program, and as the district grows and changes, we're becoming more diverse with more of these subpopulations of students that require this additional support. So I'm just proposing this position in order to kind of clean up some things within my department to make sure that we can provide the schools with the kind of support that they deserve, and that we can follow those federal compliance monitoring regulations that we're required to do. Anybody got any questions?
Did you say it was federally funded,
It is.
like 100%?
100% be out of my Title I admin budget. And there's a percentage of our Title I allocation that comes in annually that is expected to be spent on administration. And so this will be fully funded out of that. And I have talked to the Alabama State Department of Education, federal programs, and they have approved this job description prior to me even bringing it before you all, because I don't ever want to offer anything that they're going to say no to. So I vetted this with them. We actually made some tweaks and changes after I went through it with them, and they felt confident that this was in compliance.
What would get something like this? Would they ever come back and cut this job? Is that a possibility?
I don't think so, because our funding is pretty level with Title I allocation. Now, other federal programs fluctuate depending on national legislative decisions and things like that. But federal programs support for Title I has been pretty consistent over the last 15 years. It has only increased, it has not decreased. If it were to decrease, even if we took a decrease of, say, a 10% cut federally, we could sustain this position.
This is the Madison County's base registrar's job description, but Mrs. Bath, because it was federal programs and there were some unique things, she had to go ahead and adjust it and align it with the federal programs. So that's why it's coming to you. If it was just a regular registrar's position, we wouldn't have to bring the job description back. But since she's made changes to it and had to have it approved by the federal government, so we will send this to policy, to the policy review committee so that.
They have seen it. Policy review.
So that would be the president of ESPO and the president of the certified side.
And they've reviewed it and approved it, yeah. Mr. Evans took care of that.
So, but I wanted to give you a history as to why this has to come this way as a new job description. It's just, there's some tweaks that apply just to federal programs.
So if you have vague language in job descriptions, it's a definite target for the federal compliance monitoring to say, oh, those funds could be being used flexibly. So you have to have some specific things. So those subpopulations being specifically outlined there sort of protects us from that position becoming more than what federal funds would allow it to be paid for. So, any other questions?
Thank you, Ms. Bass.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you see that one, Mr. Peters? You want to give them a break, or you want to just keep going? All right. All right, sir. So the next thing on the list is, it's that time of the year. We do not have an ETF yet, Education Trust Fund budget. It still has not dropped out of the Senate. So we do not know. We're hoping next week. There is about 4 weeks left in the session. They close up on June the 8th is the last day of the session. So moving forward with having to have a salary schedule approved as quickly as possible for once they do pass the ETF. I wanted to get this out to you as far as the proposals that we're looking at. I sat down with Ms. O'Bannon, sat down with department heads. We talked about what things might need to be looked at, where we could make some additions. And so I have a list for you. The page that has the yellow bar has the title, the revision, and the rationale for it. and I'd like to go over those with you right now. So the first thing is, when the legislation does pass, the Education Trust Fund budget and the general fund budget, so far, it appears that they've passed, or they're looking at a 2% raise for the state employees. We know that Governor Ivey proposed in her budget a 2% raise for education employees. So whatever that number is, if there is a raise that is granted by the legislation, that would be added to the salaries accordingly without it going on the supplements. Okay? So that's the first one. So there is some, on the teacher's salary part, there's a clerical change that we're looking at changing some wording because the Madison County Board of Education pays the teachers on the state matrix, and then we add an additional amount of money based on years of public school experience. Well, that currently is being called a supplement. Well, it's not a supplement because they don't do additional work for it. So we're changing the verbiage on there, so we'll no longer say supplement. It would be Madison County Schools adopts the state salary matrix and pays an additional amount for public school experience. So we're just getting the supplement word out of there because it really is not a supplement. One of the things last year, and then the raise that came through with the legislation and adding the 35 steps, that adjusted all certified salaries as well as, except for principals. So several of the principals mentioned that, their assistant principals are making near what they're making now. And without having an adjustment to the entire salary schedule, talking with Ms. O'Bannon, we tried to figure out what would be something that we could possibly do to help the principals out a little bit. So what we came up with was to increase their additional supplement by $1,000. So an elementary, tech, or virtual for the principal would go from $4,000 to $5,000 on their supplement. The middle schools would go from $7,500 to $8,500, and the high schools would go from $1,500 to $1,600. It was just to help kind of align with the raise that all the certified individuals got last year by the state when they adjusted that salary matrix. So that was one of the proposals. Coming out of nursing services, our sister systems, our nurses work 185 days. They're paid for 185 days in Huntsville City. Madison pays 185, Huntsville pays 187. We need additional time for them to get paperwork and organization done. So we're proposing an additional day of contract for our nurses. So instead of them working 183 days, it'd be 184, which would basically give them 2 days on the front end, so a day for professional development, a day to get their clinics open, and then at semester, adjust for whatever medications they need for second semester, and then a day to close out at the end of the year. So they'd have the student 180 plus, 2 on the front end, 1 in the middle, and 1 at the end. So we're looking at adding 1 day to the nurses' salary, their contract. Teachers are on a 187-day contract by the state. The nurses by the Alabama, I think it's 182, is it not 183 now? I thought we gave them the extra day already. It's the nurse's salary matrix pays for 182. You already pay for an additional day. We're asking the board to pay for 1 more additional day. Mm-hmm. Right, and our lead nurse, Nurse Isman, she came and she met with Mr. Perkins, and we discussed this through, and that was one of the proposals they asked for, is, and it would give them an extra day to organize paperwork and all, so they'd have 1 day of PD preparing semester and then end of the year, so that was for the nursing services. The IT director and the operations director and the transportation directors have large departments that they have to oversee. There's currently $18,000 in supplements for there. There's an $8,000 energy supplement, and then the IT director has another $10,000 in supplements. What we'd like to do is take that $18,000 and redistribute it right into their salaries because of the size of the departments that they have overseas. So it would be a $6,000 increase to the Director of IT's position, the Director of Operations position, and the Director of Transportation's. And that would be, we already have the $18,000 in the salary schedule. It would just be reallocating, get rid of the supplements, and put that directly into their salaries. What it does is it actually puts those three positions that have large supervisory roles, it puts those three in equity with our certified coordinators. So it puts them basically at that same level as the certified coordinator. It puts them more in the supervisory roles there. The same thing with our payroll manager, personnel manager, and CMP supervisors. Those three positions are functioning at a supervisor level, which is similar to some of our other supervisors. All those positions require large supervisory roles. What we'd like to do with those is move those three positions to on the same salary schedule as our purchasing agent and eliminate them off those salary schedules as standalones and put them on the same salary schedule as our purchasing agent, which puts them right underneath the accounting supervisor, and that's already on the scale. The CMP supervisors, that is completely funded out of the CMP, so that would not be a cost of the district at all, because that would be absorbed by our CMP funds.
You know, our increases in salaries to these three directors are all paid for by eliminating that one supplement, correct? Two supplements.
For the directors?
Yeah.
The directors, we would eliminate those two supplements.
So 18,000 equals 18.
3 sixes, right. As
How
far,
much would it be for the other ones you're talking about moving up?
they're about $5,000 additional.
How many people would that
Three.
affect?
3,
Total 5,000 amongst the three?
yes, 15,000.
15,000.
Yeah, total 5, that's 5 apiece.
Okay, okay.
And 5 of that would be covered through CMP.
And then 18,000 times 3?
No, 6,000 times 3, so it would be the 18,000.
Okay, so I thought it was 18,000 per person, 6,000 per.
Correct. As far as the bus drivers, Dr. Minsky and I and Mr. Spears, who is doing an excellent job as our new Director of Transportation, by the way, we sat down, and Ms. O'Bannon and I sat down, and we looked at what we could do for our bus drivers. We had gone to a non-tenured and a tenured salary schedule. We did get notified by AEA that according to the law, they said that we did have to have a scaled, stepped salary. We agreed, we found out the non-tenured and tenured worked, but the problem is like, if somebody tried to come in from, let's say Huntsville City Schools, and let's say they had worked for eight years, so they would have been on a step 8. Well, when they came to us, they went back to non-tenured, so they were actually making considerably less. So going back to a scaled system, we could actually bring someone in at the appropriate level. So what we're proposed to do is, for the bus drivers, is we're gonna eliminate the tenured and the non-tenured scale. We'll go back and create a 0 to 10 step, which is what we have all of our other employees on, other than the ones that are specifically outlined by law. And it was salary schedules. We're gonna have, the step scale would start at 18,000 for step 0.
That's
And
current dollars, that's not what the legislature's gonna put in.
Now, this would include, if there was like, say, 2%, this would include that 2% in there because it's significantly larger, okay? So we would start them at 18,000, and they would top out at $23,000, okay? That puts us competitive with a lot of and actually puts us above most of the county systems, but we're still behind Madison City and Huntsville City.
What's our current starting for bus drivers?
It's 1705, and then it jumps to 2019 something? 18.
Okay. So that's
It's a significant increase for our bus drivers.
So how many of the bus drivers would jump to the step that's closer to 23 on a pretty quick basis?
I do not have that figure for you, Mr. Curry, but I believe that there would be,
Or would they jump to the step that's appropriate to the next step of their salary currently?
they would, Well, the thing is that the tenured piece started right there at, would be step 3, okay? Because 0, 1, 2, and 3 would be the non-tenured. So they would start at 3 there. So they may have been working for, let's just say, 5 years or 3 years at step 3, which is the tenured rate. So it wouldn't be fair to keep them there when they've actually worked 3 more years. So they actually should be like at a step 6. So we would need to appropriately place them for what their experience is justifiable for that, because they've been sitting at one spot for a considerable amount of time right now.
It's possible that somebody could jump from a 3 to a 10.
No, I don't think so, because we've only had this for about 4 years, 5 years. No, Mr. Massey, he put this in, did he not? So, Alan, do you remember, was this about 5 years maybe?
Could this possibly put, say we've got a 5-year bus driver here, a person's been driving the bus for Madison County for 5 years, could somebody come from another district with, and be paid over them?
Yes, sir.
He has a year's experience.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no doubt.
If they came from Madison City and they had been a bus driver for 7 years, they correlate, so it's 7 to 7, as long as it's the exact same job in a public school. So they would go to step 7. So yes, but it would still be equal, because that bus driver has only worked 5 for us, and they work 7 for another public institution at another school system. So it's still 5 years and 7 years respectively. The same thing applied to our minibus aides. We did the non-tenured and the tenured, and they also need to have the scaled route. So to try and help them out, we've also increased their salaries to help with retention and new hires. So at step 0, they would start off at $10,500, and then they would be topped out at step 10, and it would be $15,000. We have approximately 35 minibus aides? About 35?
Is that gonna cause a problem though? I mean, no bus driver's gonna get mad about that, are they? Is
No.
that something that they could get mad about? That's the aides versus the driver. I'm talking about 2 bus drivers. Like, if you bring a bus driver in, and I understand they've worked somewhere else, but would that not potentially make bus drivers here mad?
That's kind of a similar system teachers use.
Yeah, that's,
That's what I'm asking, will it create a problem? I'm not.
I don't know.
It shouldn't.
Okay.
It shouldn't.
That's, I was just asking.
Yeah, they're being awarded for the amount of time that they actually, they're being credited for the amount of public service that they've already done. So it's still keeping 5 to 5 or 7 to 7 or 5 to 7, depending on, so they've done the same amount of time. It's just like if they went to Madison City, they'd be treated the same way. They'd only go to 5. So, but yes, that's how we treat all of the employees coming in. If they come from another school system and they are in the exact same title job, then we place them with whatever public school experience they have for those years. Otherwise, the way it works is if they come from an outside entity and they have similar experience, but it's not the exact same job, and let's say they were driving a bus for, we'll say Bluebird or Laidlaw or something like that, then the max they could get was 3 years. But if they came from Decatur City, then it's year for year. So,
Because the matrix is that way?
pardon me?
Because the matrix is structured that way, that's for all the public school
Correct.
experience.
well, I mean,
That was-
in your example, you said late law, so a contracted bus service that's in service to a public school, you would still bring them in at 3?
3 would be the highest, which
So,
is
okay. So
the max amount.
even though the job is essentially the same, if they work there for 10 years as a late law bus driver for a public school as a contract, we still bring them in at 3?
Because Laidlaw drives buses for several different entities.
But if they said, you know, I don't know, Russellville City Schools use late law, and they did that, I'm just guessing, they
Right.
probably don't, but, and it was school system service, it doesn't look at it for year, it's not, it doesn't,
No, we have not, and the reason being is because that's a contracted service with another entity. It's not public service, they're not getting public retirement, they're not getting, it's not like RSA retirement or any of those things, so they're not actually a public employee, they're a contracted employee. So, it's not something we can, if he wants to look at, we can look at that for sure, but we have not yet. Now, most of the time when we get bus drivers, it's typically from another school system. It's not from a contracted service because they tend to pay considerably more for some of the contracted services.
Gotcha. And just remind me, I think bus drivers typically work, what, about 20, 25 hours a week? Is that?
They actually, the law reads that a bus driver is a full-time employee, like any other similar job that works 20 hours a week. So it's basically a 20-hour-a-week job. It's typically 2 hours in the morning,
Right.
2 hours in the afternoon, and we pay overtime when they exceed the 4 hours in a daily rate, a daily.
And we provide health insurance and retirement benefits.
Yes. Okay? As far as our custodians, that was another area where we've had difficulties in getting employees. So our custodian pay, when we looked at it, was pretty comparable on the high end. The problem was it was on the low end. And so what we'd like to do is increase with a larger increasing at the beginning. And I do not have the figure on here, and I will send that figure to you all. But we were only looking at the beginning, I think, 3 steps, the very first 3, bumping those up so they were more in line and so that we could do a better job of getting those initial custodian help. As far as supplements, I'm back to Mr. Rogers again. And he brought several different supplemental issues as far as things that the coaches had brought to him. And him being a good steward of his position, he was very, he defended them very well, and he made a lot of good points for them. So I want to thank him for that. He was very, honest and open and made a good case for the supplements. We're not at a point, most of our supplements tend to be pretty competitive with a lot of our districts around us, especially on the heads and some of the top assistants. One of the things that we did really need to look at in talking through this is those non-revenue sports, they're low. And when you start thinking about, for instance, golf, we don't have any 18-hole courses on any of our campuses. So it's not like football where they can walk out the field house and they're at practice. So they got to get on their car and they got to drive to Cherokee Ridge or to Robert Trent Jones or to Canebrake or wherever the courses that they're playing. And even some of our local courses have now dried up. Fox Run is no longer there, So they're driving farther. So when you think about that, they're working on a supplement for topped out at $1,500, and they're driving once or twice a week everywhere where they're going. Most of their time and their money is spent, in gas, and they're really not making a significant amount of money.
Do they get a mileage reimbursement on the fuel?
They do not.
They can be reimbursed through the booster club, but that comes at the cost of the students. They would have to up their fees. And so basically the parents would be supplementing their driving.
With those sports that have to travel in that way, I think the district should have a responsibility to pay for that mileage, if that's a possibility as well. I know we're talking, I know it gets kind of in the weeds on which sports do you do that, but, golf is one of those perfect examples that maybe you can set up a structure where you're having to travel with a consistent basis, maybe we pay mileage for that.
Each high school is given an X amount of money for transportation costs, and which time the principal dictates how that is used. So that's given from the district to the school, and then the
So
principal.
they could do it, is what you're saying.
Yes, there is a mechanism for it to be done. Whether or not the principal uses that money for, the football program or the basketball program, baseball program, girls, the swimming team, whatever. But a lot of these coaches travel on their own. Same thing like with swimming. They have to go to they go to Sharon Johnson for a little while, which is completely Oakwood. They go to the natatorium a little bit. So they're all having to commute. Bowling's another one. You know, they got to come down to, Playmore and Penn Palace? Madison Bowl. So they're doing a lot of traveling. So what we wanted to do is, and we can't do a lot because we really know that ESSER money is closing up next year, but we did want to at least show them that we're trying to do something. So what we wanted to do was increase each one of them by $250 and do from $1,000 to $1,250 for step one, or step zero. Step one from $1,250 to $1,500, and from step two, the $1,500 to $17,500. So,
Would that include, for example, the Scholars Bowl team?
no, these were, on the sheet that I sent you,
Yeah.
it actually has the positions that are, the coaching positions. That's on the worksheet as far as which ones those are specifically identified. They did not have any, there was no academic, increases. These were all just athletic. And then the other piece with that was, these assistant coaches are making $500, and we wanted to increase that by $250 and get them up to $750. Now, there's not a lot of assistant coaches here because they have to have a large number of participants, but there's approximately six.
We're using 6 across the district at that level.
Do y'all have a ballpark estimate of cost for every, what do you think it would cost? I'm not trying to hold you to a number, but you gotta have something in mind.
Right.
For the 6, it would be getting 6 times $250. So we're talking about $1,500 for the assistants.
And there's approximately,
Head coaches for those sports?
yeah,
We only have one at each school,
right, so there's about what?
at each high school, because they're not middle school sports, they're all middle school level.
I want to say there's approximately 20,
It's less than that.
less than 20. So you figure 20 times 250, so you're talking about $5,000?
I ran the numbers for the original,
Uh-huh.
that I shared. I did not run it for this specific.
So in a sense, $5,000.
No, probably close to about 6,500, 7,000, sir, total, both head coach and assistant. Mr. Rogers' first proposal was considerably larger figure than that, sir.
One of the things about the supplements for athletics, and we're having it happen right here today, we have teams that are advancing, and I like to figure out how to give those coaches who teams advanced in the state playoffs some type of small amount of money. Just nothing more to recognize that you've had a successful year, you know, obviously a little bit more for if you win the state, Hazel Green did, Buckhorn. But I'd like to have some type of built-in recognition. I realize there's no way we can adequately pay a good coach for the time and effort they put in on a team. But if you're having a special year, it's nice to have a little bit something else extra in your paycheck.
And that has been discussed, Mr. Byrd. You know, part of the discussion was that, you know, we're hiring them to win. We don't hire them to lose. And they get the same amount of money whether they go 1-10 or 10-1. But there is definitely a side of that that says, you know, as they progress, you're talking about adding an additional month of work and travel expenses and more time that's taken away from the family. And we have discussed that at different points, you know, at what point do we add it? Do you say that, you know, there's an expectation that everybody should at least make it to the first round? So if you make it to the semifinals, do you make it to the finals? You know, and we've talked about that as far as.
No, I think it should be layered. I don't think it should be just a flat amount. I think it should be, you made it to the final or Final Four,
Right.
or that type of thing. And I know that, as you said, that I'm thinking in terms of just an acknowledgement, a financial acknowledgement for the extra time that's been put in for these situations.
And we'll be happy to go ahead and look at that and come up with something, because we have discussed that at length at several times. And it's just like, you know, there's an expectation that you should make the playoffs. I mean, that's what our expectation is as a coach. you know, that you should be competitive and make the playoffs. And then at what point is, like you're saying, you know, do you make it to the Final Four? Do you make it Elite Eight? Is it Elite Eight, Final Four, or championship, and, you know, state titles and things like that? So that has been discussed. We can discuss that some more as well. We did look at one, that we thought was important to get out there right now. Not that we have one this year. We don't have one this year, do we? We have two this year. Okay. So the actual Alabama Coach of the Year, we're looking at adding if you are named Alabama Coach of the Year, it's $1,000. We're looking at, you know, asking to give them $1,000 supplement. Typically, this is not the coach that wins the state title. This is typically the coach that they were, you know, 10-10 last year, and now they went all the way to the semifinals or something like that. That's usually who gets the Coach of the Year, and that's named from the Alabama High School Athletic Association, actually awards that one. So if they're recognized as the Alabama Coach of the Year, then we're looking at $1,000, and it's a one-time, it's for that one time, for that reward. So that's one of the supplements we're looking
I was about to say, we currently have a Hall of Fame supplement.
Yes.
Currently.
Okay.
Coach of the Year.
We can do that. Yeah, the Hall of Fame is an annual, if you're named into the Hall of Fame. But if you're Coach of the Year, it's for that year that you've been named that recognizes it. The last couple supplements, or not supplements, but the last couple things that we have are, one of the things also with our bus drivers is our current bus driver sub rate is $60 and $30 for the 8, or $60 and $30 for a half day for sub route. And of course, we have difficulties getting subs. So what we'd like to do is a tech run. So if a bus driver runs their morning route and then runs the route over here to tech, and then they run those kids back to their home school and then run their afternoon, the tech run, a complete tech run's $40. So what we're trying to do is, and that's about a 2-hour turnaround. So what we'd like to do is increase our adult sub bus driver, so it's $80 a day. So basically 40 for the 2 hours in the morning, 40 for the 2 hours in the afternoon, which is the half days. That aligns with what our tech run is. It's just a lot cleaner, and it's hopefully will get us a few more sub bus drivers. And the other area that we were having a hard time is we were paying minimum wage for substitutes for our support employees. And so we'd like to go ahead and increase that rate to $10 an hour so we can get some subs for, you know, CMP and custodian and some of that, because we were paying $750 for that. The only other proposal that I have for this is that we talked about this back when we created the athletic administrator. I would like to look at moving the athletic administrator position to a 240, a 12-month position. And that being because their other additional duties are all the textbooks. So they would be dealing with, during the summer, they have to oversee the arrival, the inventory, and the distribution of textbooks before the year comes out, as well as the supervision of our athletic programs and camps during the off-season during the summer. So I'd like to have that be considered as well, as moving that to a 12-month position as opposed to an 11-month. So those are the proposals that we have at this time.
I'm adding all this up, I'm asking you, how much would that be now?
I do not. Miss O'Bannon she apologized. She's actually at a training right now. She was hopeful, she wanted to be here. We will get that figure for you, sir, and we will get that. She'll be back on Monday, and we'll get you the figure, and we'll send that out to you, so you would know what the total figure is on an annual cost.
I know we recently looked at CMP workers. I think, was that last year we did an adjustment for CMP?
We did. We gave them a raise last year, sir.
How do we measure against like Madison City and Huntsville City when it comes to our CMP staff? Do we know?
I can ask Danielle to look at that. The last time the conversation was when we did the raise, we were moving them closer to what those city systems were. And then every time we raise, they raise. So, you know, like, without saying this in a negative way, when they see what our salary schedule is for the bus drivers, it won't surprise me if they go ahead and increase theirs.
I guess we can just keep pushing then, if we can. Be
Well,
nice.
It's the advantage of their tax base.
It is the advantage of their tax
Right.
base. Now, I will tell you this, the reason that we keep our people is because we do try very hard to treat our people well, and they enjoy working for this district. And that's what keeps them around, because they all could leave to, you know, to Madison or Huntsville City. There's openings, so it's not like they, you know, they don't have that option, but they enjoy staying here. And we really believe that there's a few that have left, and they left for a little bit, and we think that some of them may very well come back with this particular, with our new salary schedule, so.
And I'll just say this, I mean, this looks good, to Brian's point, maybe a total scoring of what it's gonna be, and also just kind of give some consideration about with some of those non-revenue generating sports, about some kind of mileage credit, something, maybe it's a set amount, just to say, we understand these sports have to travel beyond, they don't have a bus, they have to go to these random and odd places. Maybe there's something to honor that, to say, hey, look, we know you're putting wear and tear on cars, you're having to travel. Maybe if it's not a per mileage basis, just an additional piece supplement is considered with the mileage, with the travel, so.
Well, and we can look at increasing this some. We were just trying to find you know.
Or just
having-
increasing the supplement,
Right.
yeah.
So, yeah, not a problem. Be happy to look at that as well. So that's the salary schedule proposals for this year. All right. The next thing is our academic calendar. Mr. Smith is pulling that up for us right now. So this is the 24-25. This is our draft. I talked with Dr. Nichols at Madison City, and he said that he had our draft, and he was having his people look at it this week. So hopefully I'll have some input from him by next week as far as what their people are looking at. It was also sent to Huntsville City Schools. We have not heard from them in any way, shape, or form as far as whether they're looking at doing something with it at this time, or if they're, you know, if that's gonna be, they're in a middle of transition, as a new superintendent will be coming in July, and if they're even gonna look at this, or if they're gonna just continue, you know, and wait till the new superintendent comes in. So, by looking at this, it has a start date of, for the teachers, of the 24th of July, with a first day for our students of July 31st. Having those first 3 days, the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd, those are our phase-in days that we have, the 3 for kindergarten, so they each, a third of the kindergarten class comes each of those days. Also, so the whole month of August is school, and then you have your first break, which would be Labor Day on the 2nd. There is an e-learning day on September the 18th. And again, this is just a draft. Looking at fall break being the week of the 7th through the 11th. So it's the first full week in October. Typically, PSAT is that week of the 14th through the 18th. It's usually on that Wednesday, the 16th. We always try and avoid that in October. It is a 9-week period where the October break is right now, so it's a clean 9-week there. A e-learning day on the 30th. We would have the 11th, November the 11th, Veterans Day, that Monday would be off. The Thanksgiving week is the 25th through the 29th. Of course, we would be that entire week. There's no school for students and teachers. Then on December 20th would be a half day, and that would be the final day of first semester. Christmas break would start on the 23rd. It would go all the way through the 2nd, and then there would be a professional development day on the 3rd. Remember, we went back and changed next year's calendar, so there was a PD day at the semester, so it's already built in this one. So that would be that Friday, with the kids coming back on January the 6th would be their first day of second semester. The 20th is Martin Luther King. The February 5th would be an e-learning day. The 17th would be President's Day. The 5th would be an e-learning day, and then spring break would fall at the 9 weeks, and that would be the 17th through the 21st. One weather day on the 18th in case we needed it. with a culmination of school on the 2 half-days, which would be the 19th and the 20th being the last day, and graduations being on the 20th and the 21st, which is our Tuesdays and our Tuesday and Wednesday. Also, this would have, for our 12-month employees, you would have July 4th off. Up in July, you would have the 26th of May, which is Memorial Day, and of course, 19th, which is Juneteenth, would be off. We would be going back to regular schedule, because e-learning would be happening, would be scheduled for June the 2nd through the 23rd to 27th. It'd be that first week, that month of June. So we would have e-learning going on, not e-learning, we'd have summer learning going on. So you would have kids in schools, in summer school going on. So, like we talked about, you know, getting rid of the 410s because we would have school going on basically for the month of June for a lot of our campuses and the Numeracy Act. So, yes,
Does our
sir.
teachers and administrators report on e-learning days to the campus?
Yes.
They do? What are they tasked with those days?
Okay, the e-learning is for the students, and a lot of times what we do, you know, we do our collaboration times during that time to alleviate some of the taking of planning times and school day time, you know, where they have some of their specialties. So it's to use with collaborative and professional development as well as, and the collaboration's the big piece. It really is the biggest piece. And then, of course, you know, you have, they still would have some time with students, as, you know, if they're connected to them, so.
The 14th of March, is that the last day of the third 9 weeks?
14th of March. Yes, sir, that would be the third 9 weeks.
It
culmination.
ends that day.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we tried to put the breaks, the.
One year we didn't do
breaks in.
that. It was embarrassing.
Yeah, no. And I think I sent those to you. Mr. Byrd had asked if I had the report card grades, the report card dates and the grade progress reports. And I sent them to him tentatively based on this schedule. But we don't put those in there yet because we don't know if it's going to adjust. So I'd be giving you times. Typically, they're usually the Tuesday or Wednesday after that week, you know, after the week break that they go out for the report cards. But I can send those to you. But again, they're speculative of this calendar here. If we change something, and I kind of wanted to hear what Dr. Nichols said as far as what their input was from Madison City, since we, you know, we may or may not be able to align with Huntsville because they may not choose to do one at this time, but we can at least look at Madison City and try and align them as best we can.
When will we approve hours?
I wanted you guys to see this right now, that we could actually do this even into June and give them some time. This does not have to come back on the 18th. So we can look at it a little bit longer and see how, because he may need a little bit more time. But, once I get with him, I'll be able to send y'all something out electronically that says, this is what Madison says, they're good, that they're gonna align with our fall breaks and spring breaks, which is really the big piece that we try to align are those two, is fall and spring.
Has the AA leadership on the district looked at it at all, or this is all still new to them?
This is going out to them tonight.
Okay.
I told, I spoke with Mr. Martin, Greg Martin, who's the president, and I said, I have it ready. Once I present it to the board, I will send it to you tonight or Friday morning, so that way you guys can start looking at it. I said, I didn't want to send it to you until after our board has looked at this. They'll also be getting salary schedule
Okay.
to review that as well, so they'll have some time to look at that.
Okay.
Okay? Future board meeting dates, they're listed. Was there any questions about the calendar, other questions on that? Okay, so these are the potential board meeting dates that, if you guys want to go ahead and
Yeah, I wanna go
discuss
ahead and-
this.
I wanna-
I've compared my calendar this time.
If you guys have your calendars, or have you already looked, then you're a step ahead. But,
We can delay it.
do these dates work for you all? I've looked at most of the dates already, and I think I'm good.
Majority of the dates except for two were working.
So the dates on the left are the dates that we,
Those will be work sessions.
Work sessions, okay.
Except for, On August 1st, we were looking at having a personnel only. Again, looking at this, the 25th is the day before teachers come back. And the first day, is the day before students come back. So that way we can get as many hires in as we can to start when the teachers' first day and then when the students' are first day. So that's why that's personnel only for August 1 and then the regular session on the 17th. Looking at the 1st and the 22nd, and you can look at these at your, leisure and just let me know. I can bring these back at a later time. I just wanted to make sure that y'all had them. July 6th, a work session, a personnel only on the 18th, a regular session on the 25th, and their personnel only on the 1st of August. And then the 17th to be regular. Then pretty much it sticks to a first Thursday, third Thursday, the 7th and the 21st for September, the 12th, 26th for October. Looking at one meeting on the 16th in November, and then one in December. And we can add a second meeting if it's needed in November or December, but going to one of each of those. Then the 11th and 25th of January, the 8th and 22nd of February, the 7th and 21st of March, the 4th and the 18th, and the 2nd and the 16th. So, and that would get us through May of next year. And then, so I just wanted to make sure that you guys had those in print so you could actually look at them at your leisure. And if something doesn't work, if you'll send me an email, I'll be happy to see what we can do.
Right now, I think I can speak for myself, but I think we're good on these dates.
Mr. Bird, you said you were?
Yes, my wife approved it.
You're, Mr. Jones, you said you have a couple with,
There's a couple
couple
of things,
words.
but I should be able to.
Okay. Mr. Brooks and Ms. Bates, you, for the most part, okay? Okay. All right, sir, that is it for our work session.
All right. Okay, we still got, this should be short from this point on. All right. Madison County Special Session for May the 4th, 2023 is in session. Mr. Kulik, back to you.
I recommend approval of the agenda dated May 4th, 2023.
Have a motion and second for the recommendation for approval of the agenda dated May 4th, 2023. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. So I have a couple of requests to address the board. I do not see our folks, okay. All right, so we're gonna move right along.
All right. Sir, I recommend approval of the bid renewal as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and second for the recommendation for approval of bid renewal as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I recommend approval of the contracts for services as submitted.
Motion.
Have a motion and second for the recommendation for approval of contracts for services as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I recommend approval of the personnel items as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and second for the recommendation for approval of personnel items as submitted. Any discussion?
No, sir. No, ma'am.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I recommend approval of the supplemental contracts as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and second for the recommendation for approval of supplemental contracts as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that concludes our regular business. Is there any motions, any adjustments to the regular business?
Just for information, Sparkman High School was ahead 2-0.
Excellent.
2-0?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
I make a motion to go to executive session to speak about school safety and a student matter.
Can I go to the restroom first?
Absolutely.
Okay, I got a motion and a second. Hey, Bill, hold on. I have a motion. Oh, hold what you got.
I second it. I'll third it, fourth it.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right, we're gonna adjourn to executive session.